All right, I am going to be your MC today. Where are we? There we go. Again, Monday Live, for those of you who are familiar with us. You can catch us on mondaylive.org, of course, which is probably where you went to register in the first place, so you know where to go. Reiterate, views here are personal, not of any company organization that we represent, so typically all of our personal views. You can post questions and comments on the Zoom chat, and we'll catch them there, and we'll talk to them. And again, the deck is also available on mondaylive.org if you want to go to it at a later date. I'm going to MC today, even though Anto is on the call. Here we go. Oh, but Anto is at an airport on his way to a wedding. And congratulations, Anto. Just to go through, so today's session, we're going to be talking about a statement or an equation that you see up there that says automation is not smart. And I guess by inference, that means smart is not automation. But anyway, which is actually part of the, no, it's not. So automation, it's only one way. Okay, automation is not smart. Fair enough. Which is actually a subject that we will be talking about at RealCom conference. For those of you going to RealCom, there's a panel on the pre-con day that we'll be talking about. So we're doing some preview of that material on this particular session. Agenda, news and trends to see what's going on in the industry. As we just said, smart buildings. Automation is not smart, which we interpret as smart buildings don't exist, and then a general discussion with the panelists and anyone else who wants to join in. Ken, what's going on in the industry?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to have to change my name if we're going to solve this equation. But other than that, automated buildings is what it is, and I think we'll continue on, and we'll take on the task of trying to become smarter. And we do understand that automation isn't the completion of smart, but it has a lot to do with how we're going to get there, I think. Anyway, what I wanted to point out is our inherent value is as a united community, and I think that's very important that we present ourselves, and we need to, I guess, sounds like the job number one is to come up with a name that suits us all. So we need to work on that. But we're starting to see a lot of stuff. Our editorial chair, Carrie, is going to be in Tampa, and she's going to be part of the Talent Gap panel. So I think that's one big problem we have, is bringing folks into our industry. We're starting to see some innovative ways of doing that. But I think the stage we're at is we all need to collaborate. And the article that we posted was put on the left here by Stephanie. She was talking actually about decarbonization, and she's talking about the problem that we tend to not collaborate. We tend to try and take our information and use it as our superpower. And the reality is that there's just not enough going, and we sometimes send out confusing messages. The other problem we have is sometimes we fail and don't do a good job of doing what we need to do. So I think in the light of smarter buildings or decarbonization, we need to collaborate. And I think that's always been a theme of automated buildings, and a lot of the folks involved in the Monday Live is collaborate. We understand that collaboration is our way of moving forward. Down at the bottom on the left-hand side is the growth of BACnet. I think as we move into AI and all these new directions, we sometimes forget our roots. And I was real pleased to see that post by BACnet showing that their penetration in the global market is still amazing, and folks are starting to work through that, through some of our existing standards. So I think it's important that we keep the light on those. I think also we have a lot of new players coming into our industry from the IT industry, and some of them don't even know what a BACnet is, believe it or not. So we need to keep some of our existing standards and methodology very visible. Basically, we've got a summary of what we did the month before with the financing, coming up with some ways to justify smarter buildings. That's there. IBCon, as was mentioned earlier, is going to be in Tampa, and we're a media sponsor of that. And all of the Monday Live folks are going to be there with their session. The other one that I wanted to introduce is we have a new advertiser called CubeWorks, and basically what they're doing is, I think the pun is they're gathering together the bright lights in the world and making them available for freelance work. And this is kind of an interesting twist on trying to solve our the talent gap situation. So we're trying to pull together a lot of information and trying to get more people into our industry and trying to build a better solution. Back to you, Anto.
No,
I did it. $5.
$5, yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone was ever going to pay up. Couple of interesting things right on the BACnet thing. I agree with you. One of the things I like doing when you're talking to IT guys in the industry and you talk about protocols, I throw the word BACnet around without actually putting it on a piece of paper, and then I always have fun looking at the minutes of the meetings afterwards and seeing how they spell BACnet. Comes back in all sorts of weird combinations, right? But the other thing that's I think is relevant is, one of the biggest challenges with AI, and especially in our space, or machine learning, more importantly in our space, is the quality of data. And our biggest trauma is trying to deal with non-standard systems who have a compound problem, not only the non-standard of the information that you're looking at, but also the quality of the data. One thing I do find with BACnet-based systems, of course, is the quality of the data is significantly more than some of those legacy systems. So, one of the messages we always push out is if you've got a BACnet system, at least we've got a fighting chance to start putting some machine learning technology on top of that, which I think is a good message for the BACnet industry, right? It's one more why BACnet, because it does help improve the quality of the data that you've got. And as Anto was pointing out in the chat, I'm saying it wrong. It's not that automation is not equal to smart. It is not smart. As automation is not equal to smart. Is that right, Anto?
That is correct. That is correct.
If you're on the call,
I can take it. I can take it. So, a couple of things. First is this video that I found on Hackster, and technically, it's actually not that complicated. What somebody did will basically take a Raspberry Pi, put a whole bunch of sensors in it, and connected all the sensors to this sort of planting area, and fed that into an AI LLM running on the Pi with presumably connection to the cloud, right? So that's not really very complicated. But what you get out of it is a conversation with a plant, in this case with a tomato plant or a tomato plant. And if you actually watch the video, it's kind of a little bit spooky because the plant is talking. It's saying things like, I'm a little dry. Can you give me some water, please? That kind of things. And it says some other things. And it's really kind of spooky, as I said. And we've obviously sort of seen this kind of thing in science fictions and all that kind of stuff, but actually to see it in action and to understand that what actually made it happen, pieces that we understand, Raspberry Pi, sensors, LLMs, right? Put it all together and you get this. And so I think that's just sort of phenomenal. The other thing that I found was really sort of intriguing is that it was talking as if it was the plant. So it was saying I with the plant. It was saying I am thirsty, or I think I'm going to be dry. I'm going to be cold tonight because the weather says it's going to be cold. So you put a blanket on me. It's kind of really weird. And it sort of brings to mind some of the conversations we've had 2 or 3 weeks back about a human needs to be responsible for maintaining the building, right? To looking after the building. I think it was Roger that was sort of saying that. And I'm kind of thinking, isn't that the sort of thing that's best done by an AI? So interesting story and interesting video. Suggest you look at that.
Yeah.
You can go to the next, you can click.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, I talked on Monday Live about this book that I was reading. That was actually 25 years old, called The Fourth Turning, and it's about sort of a cyclic historical sort of theory that these two guys were promoting. And there's a lot of sort of very, very interesting components of this story that I've been talking about with many people over the past 2 years. And if you click again, Anno, what you'll see is that not quite is that they've come up with a new book saying that the fourth turning is here, because the whole sort of rationale about it is that in this decade is the sort of the middle of the fourth turning. I highly recommend you read this book because it actually explains pretty much everything that's going on, both in this industry, in the world, and in things like the staffing things you were talking about. All those kinds of things is all wrapped up in really what's going on in the world, and this is really a sort of a good way of sort of understanding it. Highly recommended for me. And that's all I have.
And available by Amazon just by clicking on Anto's handy dandy link.
There you go.
On the plant thing, Anto, I actually saw something similar with a dog and folks who have connected up a series of buttons to some AI, and that's what the dog uses to interact with. Also really interesting to see the type of responses that the dog gives.
Right.
As a conversation.
It's coming.
It's coming, yeah. The funny one is the dog actually can swear as well, so, as it turns out. Rick, you want to talk about C4SB at IBCon?
Sure. On the 19th in Tampa, that we've got a pre-con session that is going to be part of RealCom and IBCon. You can reserve your place by clicking on that link or by going to IBCon or RealCom. We've got pretty good attendance already. The room will hold 130, 140, so there's still room for a couple of dozen more. And yeah, we apparently stirred up a little bit of controversy here by saying automation is not equal to smart. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and what we mean by that. Kind of as we go through this session, but we're kind of being intentionally a little bit provocative because we believe that the sort of RealCom audience is ready for hearing what the way forward is, moving from automation to smarter, and leveraging some of the work we're doing. So encourage you all to get your spot reserved. Sound like a carnival barker here. The room is filling up fast.
Spots are going. David's asking if it's going to be recorded. Do you know if any of that stuff will be recorded from RealCom?
Great question. Yeah, we just got confirmation that our affiliation with BIG, building, what is it? What does Brad Kultz, what does BIG stand for? This is terrible. Building Intelligence Group, sorry. Yeah, BIG. Brad's going to be live streaming it and recording it. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's news. I guess that's breaking news.
Are they doing that for every RealCom piece, or is just Brad doing it for this thing?
He's doing it for us, which is great. Shout out to Brad.
Shout out to Brad. Yeah, good on him.
And just to go back on an automation not equivalent to smart, that was actually a comment that was made on Monday Live about 2 months ago. by David Knipkamp, who was explaining how he was thinking about putting AI and smart into his controllers. And that was kind of his framework of thinking, is that it's actually a different thing altogether. The automation process and making things smart is a very, very different process. That's where it came from.
Albert's asking for the link to the registration because no web UI. Let me go back, see if I can grab that for you, Albert. Oh, sorry, this one here, right? Let's see if I can drop it in the chat for you.
But that's not the registration for the live streaming. That will probably come later. We can probably bring it next week.
Okay.
Figure that out.
Yeah, good point. We don't have the link for the live stream yet. This would be just
Oh,
for.
I see. This is for the registration.
Yeah.
Are you looking to register, Albert, or are you want the live stream?
We'll get the live stream hopefully for next week. Yeah.
He'll be a real com, so he's going.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go, Albert, I posted that in. You probably have to strip out the Google bit.
Okay.
And then Rick, you want to continue on the link on the community?
Oh, this is the list of the links for everything that is relative to Monday Live and to the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. As usual, we try and just keep the links posted here of what's coming up, and as we get more things on our schedule for next year, they'll appear where they're in the right.
Right.
And if people have ideas of where else we should go to take some of this message we're talking about, shoot me a note.
And don't forget, you can find this, by the way, this presentation is on mondaylive.org. It's down the bottom here. You can see it down here. So if you want to actually get to those links, just go to mondaylive.org and go to that particular slide. Anyone else? Any other news and thoughts out there in the industry? No, that sounds like Anto is boarding.
Sorry, traveling sucks these days. Sorry.
Yes, it does. Anto's been delayed multiple times already. Any other news, thoughts, anybody? Nope. So let's get into, I'm not sure hang on, let me see what Anto has slide-wise. So we want to get touch on the automation is not equal to smart. It's not that it's not smart, it's just not equal to smart. And the statement
So
that
can I?
Yeah.
Can I jump here because I'd like to ask the first question to Anno. So since he can't do it to himself, I'm going to do it here. So we've made this provocative statement, which obviously has turned a couple of heads so far. So Anno, what's this all about? Why smart buildings don't exist? Is it a good thing, a bad thing for people?
Well, that's a perspective, right? So everybody's going to have their own perspective on this, and I'll kind of tell you what my perspective is, and then actually my company's perspective at the end of the day. From our perspective and what we do, smart buildings in of themselves don't mean anything to me per se. They don't. Smart buildings. The fact that however you want to, to be honest, I wouldn't even know how to articulate a smart building in reality. What we really are looking for is what we call smart facilities management. At the end of the day, we're in a facilities management business, which means we do everything from mowing your lawns, washing your windows, looking after your chillers, doing a tenant refit, looking after your leases, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that go on inside the building that are much broader than just the building automation systems. And in fact, at the end of the day, the building automation system is typically seen as the thing that's in the basement that's run by the building whisperer who knows how to run that building. But from our perspective, smart buildings doesn't mean anything unless it gets translated to, can I use smart building technologies, not a smart building, but the actual technologies that go into a building. Can I use those technologies to make facility management better, faster, cheaper, effectively? In other words, that means can I make sure I'm meeting my SLAs, my service level agreements with my client? Am I making sure that my tenants are comfortable and safe and secure and well lit? And can I make sure that I'm doing that with the limited number of resources that we have today, the number of people, as Ken was mentioning earlier, is getting a challenge for our space. So how efficiently can I do that with a limited number of resources that I've got? So in all that context, a smart building, if it's as simple as, it turns on at 8 o'clock and turns off at 5 o'clock, well, we've had that for donkey's years. Building systems would do that. But the wider spectrum of things that I need to do has to equate to some sort of return on investment, some sort of value that's being presented. So a smart building as a thing in our world means nothing and doesn't exist. That's really where we come from.
So, what is it that you want from a smart building?
So what I need from more than one, but what I need from a smart building is actually I need access to the data of the systems that are in the building so that I can make better analysis of how to respond to issues that are created by the building, right? At the end of the day, when you think about it for a moment, from a facilities management perspective, if machines and buildings and systems and cities are left to their druthers, of course, chaos theory says they'll just slowly rust, corrode, and run to pieces. And so our job is to make sure that they continue to operate as they do and operate, to the design goals that we set for them. So, I can do that two ways. I can have a whole bunch of really smart people who've subject matter experts who can wander around the building and look at all the different systems in the building. And I'll even just do a simple example, like mowing your lawns, right? You can get a guy who can look at the lawns and go, yeah, in summer in Texas, we need to mow the lawns, every 2 weeks. Or I can look at putting in all sorts of sensors, water sensors, even video cameras these days do video analytics on the grass. And I can say, well, I don't need it every 2 weeks because we've had these horrendous rains for the last month or so. I'd probably need to up it to at least once a week for at least the next 3 weeks, and then I can tailor it off again. But I need data to do that, right? So I can either do it by people, which we can't get anymore, or don't have the time or the capacity to do it efficiently, or I need to use data to do that, right? And feed that data into machines and teach those machines to come up with the right answers and how to manage that building the most effectively. So I need from our context, it's not that I need a smart building, I need a building that can give me information. And the systems, all systems, not just the building systems.
So can we clarify that with Rick, if you can make some comments as to whether you've ever seen this kind of action from the market, from building owners?
Well, that's the thing I was going to add, is that building owners, whether it's a university or it's a REIT, or, they're just getting better at articulating what they're looking for in terms of information to make smarter decisions, or, to do their facilities management smarter. So whether you're hiring a CBRE or JLL or somebody like that, CBRE, obviously, or you're doing it yourself, the owners are getting more, they're just getting better at being able to articulate it. And they have all these different examples where they're seeing things that are smart or smarter, and they're wanting to see how new technology can be made to make their outcomes, happen better, faster, cheaper. And that is happening very, very clearly. And to the different owners that I have the opportunity to talk to or hear, and just in the last couple of weeks, some of you have heard me talking about it. It's like I'm writing their names down and writing the quotes down about how much clearer they are about what they can't do right now in terms of managing their facilities, and what they wish they could do with the help of technology. And so in our industry, I'm just feeling like by saying that we've already accomplished everything that ever needs to be accomplished, that's not really what owners want to hear. They want to hear that you're going to piece together this technology to help them make better decisions about their real estate and to get better outcomes. They don't really want to hear, well, we've already invented everything we're ever going to need to have smart buildings. So yes, Ken, automation is really important to smarter buildings. Absolutely. It's the foundation. Without the things that make things move, we don't have, the ability to use AI or connect AI to the real world. But owners are absolutely getting more insistent on, bring me that Raspberry Pi solution. Okay, maybe Raspberry Pi isn't very industrialized, maybe it's not supported yet, but give me some hope that you're going to bring me technology that allows me to put AI or more decision models on my buildings, and just move away from the unknown to the more confident and known way to run a building.
Yeah, and there's sizes in that problem, right, at the end of the day. So, one of the reasons we do like to tap into the building automation systems is because they do touch the most expensive, biggest pieces of machinery that we have in the building, your chillers, your air handling units and such like. So that's a no-brainer. Going crazy and putting a whole bunch of sensors and video analytics on your grass, probably not a great return per se. It's still interesting and compelling to the building owner and to the folks like ourselves who do the management. Can I better manage the limited number of mowers that I've got? So there is one of the reasons we do focus on some of the systems is because they're expensive. Elevators is another good example, right? And what the elevator companies are doing at the moment. They're doing the elevators, interestingly enough, are one of the most over-censored systems in your building, more than typical, right? They know where everything is, they know where the doors are, they know where it's going up and down, and how much weight and how many people, and how many. They can even tell you how many people are waiting in the lobbies these days. They're one of the more over-censored pieces of equipment, also one of the more expensive ones as well, potentially from electrical cost, energy cost as well. So you do find that different folks have got different focuses on what they're trying to do, where they are, right? And again, that's also different between a commercial building and a school and a laboratory and a data center. They also have different focuses on where they want to do it. But the end of the day, they're all talking about the same thing, right? How do I get more information so that I can make meaningful decisions on where do I deploy my limited resources to make sure my building is doing what it was meant to be doing.
So if I could jump in, Ano, which sensors do you think should be gotten rid of from the elevators if they're over-censored?
Oh, well, that's a really good question, right? Because they've been added in over time, and they've been added in due to life safety concerns or some other concerns, right? Over the time, some issue has happened and they've added an additional sensor, and then some other issues happened and they added another sensor. Elevators didn't start with being over-censored in the first place, right? They were simple buttons and a couple of pulleys, and you were good to go. Which would I get rid of? I don't know. I could pick anything.
So, so the original sensors was the elevator operator who rode in the elevator with the people. And then the mechanical automation allowed things to happen. So it wouldn't go up and down until mechanically it knew the doors were closed. Now there's an electronic sensor for the door being closed. But my point is really not that to put you on the spot or anything, but the way the sensoring has evolved in the elevator has evolved to actually make them go faster and allow fewer lifts to be in tall buildings. And the technology has also allowed them to go faster and reduce people's wait time. And there are all of these different factors going into it. And now it's at the point where, you know, your phone is your security badge and it knows you're there and it just takes you to your floor and you don't have to press anything and get COVID or any other disease. And I would argue that it isn't over-censored and that I was on a call earlier today with a major, well-known US-based museum that has millions of square feet. And they were complaining that they want to know more about their systems, but the control manufacturer charges them $1,000 for each individual data set that they could get out of a DDC sensor. So say they have a variable frequency drive motor that puts out 53 different data points you can get out of it, but you have to pay $1,000 for each one to get it into your system.
Wow.
And this is the history of the automation and building automation industry, where it's $1,000 a point.
That's absurd.
And it is absurd, but this is also the reality I've seen from the owner's perspective. And so I would argue that systems now are under-censored and under-instrumentalized. And because of that, we can't do remote troubleshooting. And we can't understand if the damn thing's even working properly. Because the control designer or whoever came up with the sequence of operations is like, what's the minimum we need to make it go? Okay, these 3 sensors, but you'd need these 3 other sensors to know if it's actually working as it should be working. And so this is where I see a transformation that absolutely needs to take place. Is there's nothing, more information is better, and the cost of getting this data needs to come down, because you can't find the staff you need for these buildings, and you can't find the engineers. And so your engineer isn't going to be in the building. The engineer could be in Austin looking at the building in Charlottesville. And if they had those 6 points of data for that air handling unit instead of the 3, they'd go, oh shit, this is what's happening. And we need to send a truck. I think this is what's wrong. And so I'm sorry to go on a rant, but
no, it's a
sensors are good.
It's an absolutely true rant. Of course, the term that is usually used is value engineering. And in our shop, we call this whole subject data sufficiency. So if you have a preconceived notion of what value propositions, whether they be energy, predictive maintenance, regulatory issues, enterprise management, you have to have a preconceived notion of what sensors are necessary, and those have to be sold in a project. But this is the point where I will claim that it's not just the owner, it's also the process. We have a procurement process which is forcing down that low first cost of the building at the expense of the operating cost. That has not changed. There's been lip service paid to it for the last 20 years. But ultimately, the HVAC controls take way back seat to the marble in the lobby of the building every time.
It's changing though. That's what we have to show, that it's easier now to make it happen, where the data sufficiency doesn't cost $1,000 a point. And if it's a military thing, it's $5,000 a point. Yeah, you hear these stories about how crazy it is to get you know, so people do, they value engineer. But if we show that there's a way to use technology to accomplish those outcomes, those operational outcomes, and that if you don't have the technology, you can't accomplish these particular outcomes, then in every case, they're like, okay, well, how do I make sure that I get that? I need to have this capability. And that's again, that's what we're trying to point out, is that if you let this value engineering process happen, you are not going to be able to avoid rolling a truck to be able to go see whether the fan is
Right.
pushing air.
That's right.
And that just has to become more of a, but when technology was so expensive, to the point David's making, well, we skimped on points. Hate to say it, but in the automation industry, we made our bed. We decided on how we were going to go to market and what kind of talent we're going to use, and it was very expensive. That's why such a small percentage of buildings are instrumented to the point where they should be.
But Rick, I want to lay some responsibility here on owners and architects, who are the people that are at the front end of these things, driving that process. The developer with location. If people are not more attuned to operating cost when they go in with their initial calculus, this is just a very difficult argument. And I would make the assertion that a lot of controls jobs in the controls industry now lose money, right? So on first sale, many of the large companies, small companies included, lose money on every job they put in. How do they stay in business? Through life cycle costing models. They basically make that money back over the life of the building. And you know what? The worse it runs, the more money they're going to make in service over time. So they're actually incented also to have fewer sensors go in. So what I'm saying about this whole procurement process is that if we don't get a handle on it, and if owners don't start demanding change where it needs to be, which is in business process, it's tough for us to pick up the pieces later. The one thing I can say is it's a lot cheaper to install these sensors after the fact now than it used to be, because the cost is down. But it's still a fundamental business problem at the beginning of the process.
So Jim, I'd like to weigh in on what you said, what Dave Wills was saying as well, as in terms of the business process. And it occurred to me as we were talking, having done a lot in the cybersecurity world in recent years, that the most recognized standard for design and operational thinking with regard to cybersecurity protection is called the NIST framework. And the NIST cybersecurity framework has 5 categories by which they organize their thinking and their process for how to approach the problem of securing an IT system. You can apply the same 5 areas, of course, to OT. There's no real fundamental difference. Those 5 things are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So if you think about what identify is, it answers the question, do I know everything that is out there from an IT perspective that I would need to be accountable for from a cyber risk perspective? Can I quantify it? In other words, do I have an asset list of everything that's connected to my network, whether it's over the internet or it's physically in the building, however it exists? Do I know the manufacturer? Do I know the software it's running, et cetera? It gets very specific, okay? But fundamentally, and do I know all the people involved who have access to all of these systems, and what permissions and capabilities they are given in terms of interacting with the system? So that's identify. Protect is the next one, which has to do with the technology that goes into putting like antivirus software in your laptop, as an example. But it was mentioned, I don't know if it was David or somebody mentioned what are we trying to protect? A chiller from being destroyed? in some fashion because of the expense of it. We have very expensive pieces of equipment. And so, yes, we have things to protect. And the best way we can protect them is to know what they are and how they are running, okay? Which is where the detect part of the equation comes in. So how are we going to detect anything if we don't have access to the data? And if we don't have the sensors that would give us the meaningful data to detect what those systems are doing, and then thereby being able to anticipate and respond accordingly, which gets you to the next level in the framework, which is respond. Well, so often, as I have experienced in my career, a lot of building owners don't even know what OT systems they have in their building, let alone the names of the manufacturers and the specifics around them. Okay.
Let alone what
they
OT stands for.
Operational technology.
No,
right?
no, they may not even know that.
They may not even know what OT stands for. Exactly. Yeah. It's that weak, right? So, and so how are you going to recover from a problem if you don't know what you have and you don't have systems in place to detect what's going on with it? So as a way of thinking, to whether we educate the architectural community or the owner community, I think there's a lot of value in what has already been done on the IT side. And this is an area where the IT leadership in businesses are going to resonate to our story, because almost all of them are familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework. They understand the principles around why it was developed and why it's been adopted as such a standard, if you will, in terms of how to approach the problem set. We just haven't taken the time to stand back and think about it in those kind of critical terms, because we don't operate from a risk management perspective. We operate from a simply, is it on and off? Is it, is it mechanical systems running or not? And the risks are fundamentally different. And that's what's going on. But the thought process, I think, is very relevant to our OT industry. So I just wanted to point it out because it just occurred to me as we're talking about this today.
I think just to expand on that, one of the things I think, and I agree with you, Steve, 100%. And one of the reasons in the past that people didn't really make that risk assessment was they said, it's okay because I've got Fred in the basement, my building whisperer. He knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to take the risk because, at the end of the day, I'll call Fred and he'll go sort it out for me because he always has, type of. And I think that equation is changing. I think the Freds of the world are trying to age out and want to retire and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that we do see, going back to, in fact, Ken's earlier point about trying to get new folks into the industry and space, I think that is starting to hit upon some of the owners and operators that I could in the past mitigate some of that risk and uncertainty because I've always got Fred to rely on to go and put eyes on it and fix it and put the piece of duct tape on it and stuff like that. In fact, it was explained to me the other day, I thought it was really germane by a building owner. He goes, yeah, I've got Fred in the basement and he knows exactly where the duct tape is on the piece of wire that nobody's supposed to touch. If I lose him, I'm sure I'm going to electrocute somebody by accident or whatever. But I think that's one of the dynamics I do see changing is that, okay, we're not getting the people anymore that we're getting in. The guy who was there is retiring out. So in fact, my risk is actually going up as a result. And it used to be mitigated and now my risk is becoming more significant because I don't have folks coming in to pick up that change. And, and again, to equate that back to the elevator example, that's why we did over sensor or sensor the elevators, because risk there is life safety, right? We're putting tenants in boxes and making them go up and down holes. So that was a no-brainer, right, to put the cost and the dollars into that sort of technology, and that's why we did. But to your point, in some of these other spaces, it was like, it's okay if I don't do it because I've always got Fred. Now it's like, Fred is leaving. What do I do now? Type of deal.
So I think that brings up a really interesting point because we're all aware of the institutional knowledge that's in all of the respective Fred and Fredina or Edwina, whoever are the building whisperers around the world. And that institutional knowledge is going to disappear. And there's really no place where that knowledge and information can go before they leave.
Right.
And that's a very interesting challenge. And so put that on one side. On the other side, you have the majority of commercial building owners don't care about the building outside of it being a financial investment. And they care about the return on capital, net operating income, and their hold time. And same thing with developers frequently. They just want to build it, get it leased, and flip it. And the people who are, a core fund free for office is looking to buy a building, hold it for 5 years, and flip it. They don't want the details. They don't want to know. They actually prefer not to know, because then it's a liability and they have to report it to the next owner. So you have the whisperers on this side aging out and the institutional knowledge disappearing. And then you have the owners who don't actually want to know on this side, and all of this information in the middle that needs to be managed. And when you look at the EPA disclosure requirements that are coming, the SEC disclosure requirements, the title or local law 97 requirements, the California law requirements, all of these things are boding towards spending money to do better management and better disclosure, rather than spending money on fines and lawyers. And so what really needs to happen is a cultural change in understanding that a building that's managed in a proactive way holds its asset value and accrues asset value, where you have a building with deferred maintenance and reactive building management doesn't retain value in the same way and poses more risk. And I think those are the messages that the actual asset holders and owners, who are not owner occupants. Most of us have had the pleasure of working with universities, hospitals, businesses that own their own campuses where they can spend the money and care. That's a minority of assets. The majority is out there. So I think it's a cultural change we need to help on the owner's side, as well as the facility and building management side.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to circle back to the $1,000 per sensor equation. One of the other things we're starting to notice is that the IoT guys, just to go back to one of my favorite hobby horses for a moment, the IoT guys, of course, came in to try and disrupt the $1,000 per sensor model, right? That was one of their big missions, because they saw the big controls guys, that was their standard price. And so they were trying to come in with the wireless IoT, Raspberry Pis, low solutions to come and disrupt those businesses. The problem that they had, of course, was their business model, especially their VC backed, was, I don't want you to sell cheap sensors. I want to sell you need to sell all this value added analytics that happen in the cloud. And that's really where people will pay money. We're seeing a lot of those models falling apart. They haven't really got the traction, or they did the initial, few pilot projects that kind of have petered out. And we're starting to get some of these IoT guys now circling back to how can we just make your life easier with cheaper sensors, quicker deploys, and to pick up additional data. And their business models are starting to change a little bit because our approach is, that's really what I want. I'm not really interested in your analytics that you're doing in the back end. That has no value to me per se. And so we're starting to see some traction in that area.
And that's of course what we're trying to encourage also with what we're doing with the IBB
Right.
is to have those IoT folks and everybody else realize that there's a new kind of architecture that is based on cloud native computing, which most people don't quite yet understand, but that allows for premise, hybrid, cheaper, better, faster deployment of all kinds of new capabilities. And that's the sort of the punchline of the automation is not equal to smart, is that at the end of the session, which we'll probably get to in a couple of weeks here, we actually show that there are new architectures that allow for these sorts of challenges to be on their way to the being history. When we can finally say that we've got all of the instrumentation that we potentially need, maybe even more, because it's cheap, go ahead and put in a few more. We've got AI, we've got these new cloud native architectures. We ought to be able to eliminate a lot of what were, scarce resources or scarcity mentality or trade-offs or value engineering. A lot of that should be a thing of the past. Not there yet, but it should be. We're on the way there.
Yeah, I did. So I guess I'm just going to bring up Anto's last slide on this to sort of bring that together, right, Rick? And you guys can read as fast as I can read it to you.
And this is go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, man. I was going to tangent off this a little bit.
Go for it.
I was going to say, so Ken, just circling back to you, because I know you had a big concern about automation is not equal to smart. I think one of the messages we're trying to deliver here, right, is, and I think David said it really well with the whole elevator example, automation is still a crucial component, right? At the end of the day, doing all this smart stuff doesn't mean anything unless you've automated the systems that are actually controlling. Because you don't want to do all this analysis and go back to people doing the automation. Automation is still very much a key part of what we do within the facilities. The question is really what automation does is basically something totally different to what smart does, especially in my world, right? Smart is all about what I use that information more for to improve the automation and make that automation better with less folks than it is today. Does that kind of make some sense?
Yeah, so just again, guys, I encourage us to recognize that smart starts with a smart process or smart design, okay? And if the design criteria is all around just strictly how do I automate a chiller, boiler, air handler, etc., then by definition, we're leaving out the ongoing operational aspects of the system, which is your point, Anno, that you're making. And so by redefining or using this notion of a smart building and saying, we need to start thinking smartly about how we implement automation systems or OT systems in our building, and broaden the definition beyond automation to include ongoing operations, so that these benefits that are on this current slides just naturally emerge, because the data will be available to allow all these wonderful things to happen.
Right.
And that's where we're falling down to, because Jim said it earlier about the way the architectural and engineering community works. It does not work today to think in terms of the life cycle of the building and how smart needs to incorporate the ongoing operations. And I just point to NIST as an example, not saying we would use the NIST framework, but the thought process behind it is the right thought process in my mind.
So Ken, did this all make sense in the end? Did we allay your fears a little bit? You don't have to go and rename automated buildings.
Well, I'm getting close to the end of my tender here anyway, so maybe that's the way. No, I understand it's a great attention getter, and certainly the hybrid, I think, moving forward is going to be the solution, where we're starting to see the mashup of IoT. Basically, cloud native is a big player, and we're starting to see that in the automated buildings website, as we're starting to see that the last probably 4 or 5 sponsors have been definitely coming to us from cloud native and you know, they all, even this the new method of attracting people to our industry and freelance. We're starting to grow up and starting to evolve. And you know, there's some pretty significant changes for us as an industry to get our minds around. That point cost, I think, is a big issue. We've got to hit our industry on the nose that we can no longer roll out those $1,000 a point, because what's happening is the devices are coming with somebody mentioned 50 points, an adjustable speed drive. Yeah, an adjustable speed drive is a great example, or a chiller. I mean, they come with 50, 100 points, and when you release those points, you don't, you know, they're virtual, they're cloud native. They can be implemented very easy, and we don't want to have people throttling data because they can. And I think we really have to take the newspaper and smack them on the nose that you're not going to be able to do that, or we will change them.
Especially the fulcrum of pricing is around a point, Ken. But the fundamental problem is all the cost is around the system integration and preparation of the data. So we have a mismatch in the economic process by which value engineering and pricing is done of control systems to start out with, because we're working on a 30-year-old per point model,
Right.
where the points are actually much cheaper, but the higher level engineering is actually much more sophisticated than it used to be, and people aren't allowed to get paid for that. That's the fundamental problem.
Mhm.
Once again, that starts with owners and architects reimagining what they want to buy, or we need to educate them
Right.
as to why they're painting themselves into a corner. Hopefully Rick can help us do that.
Yeah, one of the problems in the hybrid model is that they only bring a part of the story to the table. And so then they bring up incredibly low costs and incredibly high point counts. But you're quite right, then it's the integration and how are we going to make that new information useful. So that's kind of a problem as well. The wireless
which is why, by the way, a lot of the effort in the IBB is to do the orchestration and the plug and play, is actually to reduce the labor significantly. That is really, really important. I'm really glad that that's been brought up.
And that charge will be led by the wireless. One of the most amazing things of the wireless is its fact to self-organize itself and allow you to put sensors in and basically automate the integration. And so that's an interesting twist, and we're starting to see one of our newest advertisers is in that sponsors is in that area as well. So we're starting to see the evolution, but as you know, evolution in our industry takes a long time.
It does. Look at all the gray hairs on this call. I think, and lack of ears. Sorry. All right, Anton, I'm not sure, did you actually make it on the plane? The last picture didn't look like you were on the plane yet.
No, I'm still in the terminal.
I'm sorry, man. Good luck with the flight. We'll call it there because we're right at time. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
All right.
Good luck,
Bye-bye.
Anton.
Bye.
Thanks, Anna. Cheers.